We are actually entering a much riskier world economy. But equally, I want to put to you that this may also be a world in which it makes sense to take more risks if you're going to flourish, if you're going to thrive. In a more disruptive era, which I argue that we are entering, your business and in your own personal lives, you may need to take more risks, take more chances in order to find opportunity.
Risks around their business model have come up in their top 1 or 2 points on the CEO's agenda. And the problem is they can't get their hands around this thing. It's not just an advisor's point. It's an actual issue of what is the business model and how can you actually see what it is. Because too many people are following the herd on the business model.
We launched a business model, the low cost over long haul, which everyone said is impossible to do. All the experts in the industry, the big global giants, Ryanair, Southwest, EasyJet, all said, we don't do this. Everyone who's tried to do it has successfully failed.
A risk is a thing that makes you fail to achieve an objective. It's all to do with what your objectives are as to what a risk is. And that's why risk is so difficult, because a risk to somebody is not to somebody else.
It seems one of the things that is most difficult for companies to do is to take risks, especially where they might have existing lines of business that are threatened or where there's an existing profitability. If there's a genuinely disruptive idea, no matter how great it is, it will be quashed. Or worse, the oxygen will be sucked out of it.
We started by questioning every single assumption, and that was my only qualification coming into this role, which was to basically ask why and why not. And we turned everything upside down, kept challenging ourselves to the nth degree. We didn't have the answers. No one has the answers. There is no best practices. We were writing the rules as we went along.
Risk is when you have something and you decide you're going to give it up because you want to try something that may not work, and when it doesn't work, it's going to be ugly. That's risk.
So I think because people are so conditioned by their education, by the parents and by society, by enculturation, people don't really try and take risks because we're actually conditioned not to take risks.
And a lot of it is bad management, which is internally not allowing the innovation coming through.
Try, move fast. We believe the philosophy is do 10 things. 6 out of 7 right, we're doing very well.
What do you do when you fail? Because almost always you will fail when you take risks.
Key is when those 3 or 4 things go wrong, just change tact fast. Don't worry about what went wrong or who's to blame. Just keep going ahead.
I don't mind if you strike out more often at the plate. It gives us a chance to hit more home runs as a company. And in fact, once in a while, we might hit a grand slam. And in this much riskier world economy, to solve the really big problems like climate change, healthcare, and so on, we need a few grand slams. And so just learn the right lessons. Fail quickly.
I actually celebrate failure. I love talking about failure. Without failure, you don't get success. That's very simple. There's no one in the world that gets success at the first go. There's always failure before that. And I think you have to embrace that. You have to put it as like a common denominator, as a must. You must fail before you succeed.
In the spirit of how to deal with failure gracefully, how to create a learning organization, it is worth actually stopping and saying, why did this go wrong? Because human nature in corporate culture is to bury failures. And the companies that do best are ones that actually stop and say, not in the sense that we're going to sack you, whose fault was it, but whose fault was it? And why did this go wrong? Let's not make the same mistake again, and let's not let another part of our company that didn't know about this because we buried it make the same mistake in some different way.
I think sometimes you have to have misery or austerity to really find out what you really want to do as a person. For the people that are coming into your company or existing people, I think, if you want that kind of change environment where they're embraced by failure and recovering from it as quickly as possible, you have to hire the right people. I mean, in my experience, I would say that people are the biggest risk in business to get it right and also to get it wrong.
Risk-taking only looks like risk-taking if the rest of society is not risk-taking. If we were all risk-takers, it would just be chaos.
Well, you have to have a risk management system. And a risk management system, it really scares me because it sets this tone of saying, well, identify your risks and then figure out how you mitigate it. It forces you to think about commonality or conformity with how other people do it. And the concern about taking a systematic approach to risk is you suddenly are forced to conform to how everyone else does it. So risk so much, yes, it's about taking the gamble, but really looking at a problem very differently.
It's really about unconventional thinking, isn't it?
The best organization now is to have that core operation of fantastic people in the right positions who love what they do, because a lot of people don't like risk. It stresses people out. But you also need, in the most successful organizations, the maverick around the outside, or mavericks, if you like, who are always finding new ideas and new innovations and are visionary in what they're doing. Visionary in terms of they can see something and then they can see, right, that might actually work for our clients.
A good entrepreneurial person, when they see something, they're energized, they know what they're doing, they can see the model, they've got a picture ahead of everybody else.
When you've got a vision, and you know, a lot of people flower this kind of thing up, like, oh, Steve Jobs must have a vision, but actually that's very true. You've got to have a vision, you've got to find a niche in the market or a gap in the market where people really want something really bad.
It's interesting because as a leader, I feel the one thing that really keeps me up at night is figuring out how do you keep that unique culture of being open, being willing to accept and question alive. You know, we have to always be this nimble and adjusting. And while it works when we're a smaller team, how do we scale that up, especially once we start becoming all over the world?
I think we should be more human beings sometimes rather than human doings, because that creativity is found in that being space where you're not afraid to actually create something, where you're not going to be afraid of what other people are going to think about it. And I think the biggest resistance you get in your life is the disease to please other people.